Hello, and welcome to my predictions video for this year's Oscars. So just to clarify, I'll only be doing the sort of 6 main categories, the acting categories, the directing, and then Best Picture. There are some other great nominations. For example, I would love for Coco to win Best Animated. I would love for Roger Deakins to win Best Cinematography, but I think we all know that's probably going to happen. I would love for Blade Runner or maybe Planet of the Apes to win Best Visual Effects. Best Original Screenplay, I would love The Big Sick to win. Best Adapted Screenplay, of course, it's Logan. But anyway, last year when I did my Oscar videos, I edited in a slightly different style, and I'm going to do that with this year as well, just because I feel like it's easier to present the films in this format. So the rest of the video will look like this. Okay, let's start with Best Supporting Actress. So for Best Supporting Actress, we have Mary J. Blige for Mudbound, Allison Janney for I, Tonya, Laurie Metcalf for Lady Bird, Leslie Manville for Phantom Thread, and Octavia Spencer for The Shape of Water. Now I'm going to do like a who should win and who will win thing, because that's what everyone seems to do, and frankly it's a very good way of doing it. In my opinion, Laurie Metcalf should win. She gave an incredible performance, and I think we can all agree that the airport scene was just incredible. I will say that Allison Janney will win, just because she's won every other award pretty much, and her performance in I, Tonya was pretty amazing. But I will have to say that do not be surprised if Laurie Metcalf or Leslie Manville gets it, because the Academy does love Phantom Thread, like that type of film, and Leslie Manville was great in Phantom Thread, so do not be surprised if she gets it. But my personal choice is Laurie Metcalf, but I think that Allison Janney will win. On to Best Supporting Actor. For this category, the nominees are Willem Dafoe for The Florida Project, you have Woody Harrelson and Sam Rockwell for 3 Billboards, you have Richard Jenkins for Shape of Water, and you have Christopher Plummer for All the Money in the World. Now, Christopher Plummer is the only performance in this category that I haven't seen, but I don't think he's going to win anyway. I think Sam Rockwell will win, and I'm going to say he should win as well, because this is a guy who has for so long been sort of ignored by Hollywood. He has been such an underrated actor, and he's been so great in every film he's been in, and I think that an Oscar will just give him the validation that he deserves. But also, Willem Dafoe in The Florida Project, which was snubbed for Best Picture, by the way, I'll talk about that in just a bit. Willem Dafoe really deserves this Oscar because he is just so good. This is one of his best performances, and I'm going to say that Willem Dafoe should win. So, like, there's 2 should wins with Sam Rockwell and Willem Dafoe, but I think that in this case, Sam Rockwell will win. On to Best Actress. Now we have Sally Hawkins for The Shape of Water, Frances McDormand for 3 Billboards, Saoirse Ronan for Lady Bird, Margot Robbie for I, Tonya, and Meryl Streep for The Post. Now, for most people, it's pretty obvious, right? It's Frances McDormand. In fact, in my opinion, this is probably the most sort of easy one to predict. It's almost 90% going to be Frances McDormand, with Sally Hawkins and Saoirse Ronan having 5% each. Margot Robbie and Meryl Streep, as much as I love their performances, Margot Robbie was so good in I, Tonya, I doubt they're going to win. And Saoirse Ronan, I think she really deserves this because she was just brilliant, and so does Sally Hawkins. But Frances McDormand will win because her performance was brilliant. I would say that personally, I think that Saoirse Ronan should win, just because her performance in Lady Bird I love so much. She's been nominated 3 times now, and personally I just feel like she's got to get it. But saying that, she's only in her early 20s, and she's got a long and very prosperous career ahead of her, so I wouldn't be surprised if she gets an Oscar down the line. But Frances McDormand, this is her 2nd Oscar if she wins, because she already has one for Fargo, but she does deserve it, so I'll say that Saoirse Ronan should win, but Frances McDormand will win. On to Best Actor, we have Gary Oldman for Darkest Hour, Timothée Chalamet for Call Me By Your Name, Daniel Day-Lewis for Phantom Thread, Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out, and Denzel Washington for Roman J. Israel Esquire, which is actually a film that I quite like, despite most people saying it's a bad film. Here I think that Gary Oldman should and will win. Gary Oldman has been one of the best actors in Hollywood. He is a legend. He's one of the greatest actors we have working today, and his performance as Winston Churchill is quite frankly amazing. Whether or not it's the best performance in this category is debatable, because the other performances were all great, but I feel like this is sort of a lifetime achievement type award, because in my personal opinion, this is not Gary Oldman's best performance, but he should win just because he's such a legend, and he's just been giving great performance after great performance after great performance in pretty much every single film. However, I would love to see someone like Timothée Chalamet win, because he was just so good in that film. But just like Saoirse Ronan, this guy has a long and prosperous career ahead of him, and I'm sure he'll win an Oscar one day. And then you have someone like Daniel Day-Lewis, who, if he wins, this would be his 4th Oscar, which is a bit ridiculous, but it is his last performance, apparently. But the Academy loves Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, they've given him 3 Oscars, so he does have a chance, but I think that it will go to Gary Oldman, and quite frankly, it should go to Gary Oldman because he is a legend. Now, on to Best Director. We have Guillermo del Toro for The Shape of Water, Christopher Nolan for Dunkirk, Greta Gerwig for Lady Bird, Jordan Peele for Get Out, and Paul Thomas Anderson for Phantom Thread. Again, Phantom Thread has gotten a lot more recognition than initially expected, and I would not be surprised if Paul Thomas Anderson wins because the Academy do love him. Phantom Thread is a very well directed film, but I think that it should and will go to Guillermo del Toro. This guy deserves it, not only because Shape of Water is one of his best films of all time, and it's a super well directed film, but he's just someone who is such a diverse filmmaker, such a unique voice in Hollywood, and he's just so creative and he's so different, and no one makes films like Guillermo del Toro, and to see a filmmaker who most people wouldn't regard as a mainstream filmmaker get it would just be so great. I feel like I have to talk a bit about Christopher Nolan. I know I've said it quite a few times, and I'll say it again when I talk about Best Picture, you know, that I don't love Dunkirk, but it is a technical achievement, and Christopher Nolan, he has directed my top 3 favourite films of all time, Prestige, Dark Knight, and Inception, but I think that he can come back. Now's not his time. Now is Guillermo del Toro's time. Okay, Greta Gerwig and Jordan Peele are both great. However, I do feel that Sean Baker and Dee Reese and Denis Villeneuve especially may have been more deserving of that nomination, but they were all great. But it is Guillermo's for the win. On to Best Picture. I'm going to do this slightly differently. I'll tell you who should and will win at the end, but I'm going to rank all 9 films just because. So starting off with The Post. This is my least favorite out of all the 9 films. Now, in my personal opinion, I didn't love The Post. I gave it a B+. And I just don't think that a film that gets a B+ should be nominated for Best Picture. I mean, last year when I reviewed all the Oscar films, not a single film went below A-. And we have 2 B+ films, in my opinion, on this list. And The Post, I just think that it's a good film, but it just doesn't deserve that nomination. I think that the only reason this film is recognized is because of Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, and Meryl Streep. And quite frankly, this is just sort of an average good film. And if you want to be nominated for Best Picture, you need to be more than good. You need to be outstanding, which is why I felt that last year's nominations were so good, because each and every single film were just really, really unique and outstanding. Moving on to number 8, you have Darkest Hour, which is another B+ film. I think that the only reason this film has been nominated is because of Gary Oldman. However, I have to say that Joe Wright really did a great job directing this film here. And I was really impressed by his direction of that film, the visuals and everything. But it's, again, it's just more of the same. King's Speech is already won for one of these like British period pieces. We don't need another one of these in here. We could easily replace it with Blade Runner, with Mudbound, with Florida Project, with I, Tonya, all of which are better than Darkest Hour and The Post. Moving on to number 7, which is Dunkirk. Now, there's a big gap between Darkest Hour and Dunkirk because I do like Dunkirk quite a bit, I just don't love it. On a technical level, like I've said, this is a masterpiece. I just don't feel that it has the characters and the heart to win Best Picture. But personally, I just don't feel that this film has what it takes to win Best Picture. I just didn't really love it that much. And I know a lot of people do, but personally, I do not think that this film will win Best Picture, and personally, I didn't love it that much. Moving on to the next pick, Call Me By Your Name. This is a great film. This is a really, really well-directed film. It's a very well-acted film. It's a very well-shot film. But to be quite honest with you, it did bore me at some point. Because it's so realistic and it has a very realistic depiction of life, it did bore me a little sometimes, but it is a very, very profound experience, and I really, really did like it. Moving on to the next pick, which is Get Out. This was a great film. I rewatched it recently, and it gets better the second time. If you've only seen Get Out once, watch it again. It gets better, because you pick up all the little details that Jordan Peele put in there, you know, before the plot twist, and it's really great. Daniel Kaluuya and Alison Williams, just the entire cast are great. And it's such an important film as well. I'm not going to talk too much about how it's sort of black representation in films, because everyone's talked about that. But aside from that, it's important because it shows that small indie films can get recognized if they're good, if they deserve it. And Get Out definitely deserves it. I just love this film. Moving on to the next film, Phantom Thread. I saw this film. This is the most recent film that I saw, and I fell in love with it. Paul Thomas Anderson just kills it. Daniel Day-Lewis just kills it. The entire cast is just so good. And it's an Oscar bait film. We can all agree it is an Oscar bait film. It's quite pretentious, But when Pretentious is done this well, it's kind of hard to argue. This is a really, really good film. That's all I'm going to say. Moving on to number 3, Shape of Water. The Shape of Water is a film that, just like Phantom Thread, is so captivating and it's so beautiful. And you can tell that there's just so much passion, so much creativity put into this film. And I just loved it so much. Moving on to number 2. Now, I feel like I have to remind you quickly that this order is in my personal opinion and not my predictions. It's just my personal opinion. And my number 2 is 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This is a hilarious film. It's a heartfelt film. It's so brutal, but it's so beautiful at the same time. Frances McDormand gives a brilliant performance. So does Woody Harrelson. So does Sam Rockwell. The script is amazingly written by Martin McDonagh, and he directs the shit out of this film as well. I just really love every minute of 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Number 1 is, of course, Lady Bird. Out of all the nominees, this is the only film that I gave an A+ to, which is quite weird because I gave out a lot of A+ last year. Moonlight, La La Land, Hacksaw Ridge, what else was that? Manchester by the Sea. Quite a few A+, whereas this year, only 1. Because Lady Bird was the only film that just truly, genuinely hit me on a level that no other film that in this category did. And it's just so relatable and such a beautiful, simple film. And I would say that Lady Bird should win. However, the will win will go to either The Shape of Water or 3 Billboards. Very similar to last year. It was between La La Land and Moonlight. Now, I'm going to say that the favourite is 3 Billboards. I would say that 3 Billboards has around 70% of winning and Shape of Water has a 30% of winning. But do not be surprised if Shape of Water comes out from underneath and wins. But I am going to put my bet on 3 Billboards. And that is it for my Oscar predictions video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow when I do my recap of the Oscars. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. Thank you.